If you worked at the hospital, you might have seen him, a small, scruffy gray cat waiting outside the emergency entrance every single morning. Rain or shine, he sat by the automatic doors like he was expecting someone who never arrived. Most staff thought he was just another stray lingering for scraps or warmth, but no one could explain why he never left, not even for food. Inside, Henry wiped down the same hospital hallway he'd walked for 17 years. A janitor with tired eyes and a limp from an old factory accident, he worked the graveyard shift when most of the building slept. His coworkers barely spoke anymore. Most had come and gone. After his wife passed 2 years ago, Henry stayed late just to avoid going home. He noticed the cat on a night when snow covered the parking lot and the wind howled like it had a voice. The animal was curled up under the heat vent, shivering but refusing to leave the doorway. "You again?" Henry muttered, tossing a piece of leftover ham toward him. The cat didn't move. He just stared at the hospital doors. For some reason, that gaze hit Henry in the chest like a brick. It reminded him of the way his wife looked out the window in her final days, waiting for a miracle that never came. The next night, Henry brought a towel and laid it near the vent. The cat didn't thank him, but he didn't run either. Word spread among the night shift. The cat was always there. Some nurses joked he was their new security guard. Others felt uneasy, like the animal knew something they didn't. A pediatric nurse swore she saw the cat meow just as a patient coded in room 412. People started calling him Guardian. Still, no one could figure out why he came. He wore no collar, had no chip, and never begged for food. Every attempt to coax him inside failed. He'd back away, always looking toward the ICU wing. Henry started watching him more closely, wondering what the animal saw that they didn't. One icy night, the cat wasn't at the door. Staff exchanged uneasy glances, their routines feeling strangely incomplete. Henry walked the perimeter, scanning shadows, until he heard a soft, muffled cry from under an old maintenance van. There he was, paw injured, eyes dull, but still alive. Henry wrapped him in a coat without thinking. The cat didn't resist. For the first time, the animal allowed a human to touch him. His fragile body trembling but trusting, Henry whispered, "I got you, little guy." Inside the AA, a nurse rushed to help, but paused when she saw the cat's face. She went pale. That's the same cat Mrs. Ellison used to feed," she said. "Remember the teacher who died last year in room 5? Henry froze. His wife had died in room 5, and he suddenly remembered. She had mentioned a stray cat that kept showing up by her window. The pieces began falling into place, heavy and slow. The cat hadn't just chosen this hospital by chance. He had returned to a place where he had been loved, and perhaps where someone he loved had disappeared. Henry stared at the animal, heart pounding. "You knew her, didn't you?" he whispered. The veterinarian on call stitched up the cat's paw, but everyone in the A was still shaken. Nurses whispered down the halls, pulling up old records and security footage. Sure enough, the cat had been spotted outside the hospital the very day Henry's wife was admitted, and he had returned every day since her passing. Henry sat in the break room with the cat wrapped in a heated blanket, his hands trembling more than usual. "Why would you keep coming back?" he asked softly, though part of him already knew. The cat didn't purr. He just looked at Henry the same way his wife used to, calm, knowing, waiting. They scanned for a microchip again. Nothing. Posters were put up around the neighborhood. No one claimed him. It was like he belonged to the building itself. He had roots beneath the concrete, or like he'd made a silent vow no one could hear but everyone could feel. The staff started avoiding eye contact with Henry, afraid they'd say the wrong thing. One night nurse said quietly, "Maybe it's her, coming back through him." Henry didn't believe in signs, but something inside him cracked open when she said that, like a sealed door finally giving way. Administrators wanted the cat removed, hospital policy. "We can't have stray animals inside the EA," they said. "Health code violation." But Henry had already made up his mind. "Then you'll have to write me up," he replied, his voice firm for the first time in years. "He's staying tonight." The janitor brought him home that night, placing him gently on a folded blanket beside the heater. The cat didn't explore or hide. He went straight to the living room window and curled up on the sill. That was where Henry's wife used to sit, knitting or watching the birds. Henry stood frozen in the doorway. By morning, the cat hadn't moved an inch. Henry placed a saucer of food nearby, but the animal didn't touch it. Only when Henry sat beside him, rubbing his arthritic knees, did the cat blink slowly and rest his head on the old man's foot. Henry felt a warmth he hadn't known since the funeral. Over the next week, Henry brought the cat back to the hospital with him. "Emotional support animal," he joked to skeptical coworkers. But no one argued anymore. Patients smiled when they saw the little gray guardian perched near their doors. Some swore their pain felt lighter with him nearby. One evening, a teenage girl in oncology asked if the cat could visit her room. She hadn't spoken in days, but when the animal climbed gently onto her bed, she whispered, "Thank you." Tears filled her father's eyes. "She hasn't said a word since the diagnosis," he whispered to Henry. "Not one word." That night, Henry sat in the supply closet, holding the cat like a child. "I don't know what you are," he murmured, "but I think she sent you, and I can't walk away now." He buried his face in the cat's fur, and for the first time since his wife died, Henry cried without shame. The hospital reluctantly made an exception. The cat, now affectionately called Winston, was given a small badge with the words "Therapy Companion" unofficial. He began joining Henry on his night shifts, quietly following as he mopped floors and emptied bins. Patients and staff alike found peace in his silent presence. Henry changed too. He started arriving early and staying late, not because he was avoiding home, but because people were beginning to count on him again. The man who once walked halls like a ghost now paused to chat, to comfort, to laugh, all because of a quiet cat who refused to let go. Word spread beyond the hospital. A local paper ran a story. "Stray cat refuses to leave hospital. Becomes unexpected healer." Soon people were writing letters. Parents of former patients, strangers who'd seen the article, even a woman who swore Winston visited her in a dream. The story touched something raw in people. A retired nurse came back just to meet him. "My husband passed here 10 years ago," she said, kneeling beside Winston. "He loved cats. Maybe some part of him stayed." Henry watched her stroke Winston's fur and realized something. The cat wasn't just helping him heal. He was helping all of them. But not everyone was pleased. The hospital board issued a formal complaint, citing liability and cleanliness concerns. "Either the cat goes," they told Henry, "or you do." He stood in silence, eyes on the tiled floor. Then he calmly removed his name badge and placed it on the counter. "Then I guess this is goodbye." He didn't even finish his shift that night. Henry walked out the doors with Winston tucked inside his coat, heart pounding, unsure what came next. At home, he paced, torn between grief and rage. "What are we supposed to do now, huh?" he asked the cat. Winston just blinked, then curled up in his wife's old chair. The phone rang the next morning, a call from the girl's father in oncology. "She's been asking where the cat is," he said gently. "She hasn't smiled since he left." Henry stared at the receiver. He realized then, this wasn't just about him anymore. Winston was doing something Henry never could. He was giving people hope. Inspired, Henry started writing letters to the hospital, to local officials, to anyone who would listen. He included photos of Winston with patients, quotes from staff, even a copy of the girl's thank you note. "He's not a stray," he wrote. "He's part of the healing process. You don't fire healing." Days later, a news van showed up at his door. Then another. The story went viral. Former janitor fights for therapy cat who won't leave hospital. People rallied, online petitions, fundraisers, even hand-drawn posters from children who'd met Winston. The hospital had no choice but to respond. And they did. In a press conference, the hospital's director held back tears as she announced a new pilot program, animal-assisted therapy, inspired by Winston the cat. Henry stood beside her, Winston in his arms. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a man who'd lost everything. He felt like he'd just begun again. Henry was offered his job back, but this time it came with a title that meant something deeper: wellness liaison. He and Winston returned to the hospital together, not as janitor and stray, but as a team. They visited long-term patients, grieving families, and lonely night staff. Wherever they went, something shifted. Lighter, warmer. At home, the silence wasn't heavy anymore. Henry talked to Winston while he made breakfast, while he sorted mail, while he sat by the window his wife once loved. The cat would respond with a slow blink or a gentle paw on Henry's leg. It wasn't words. It didn't need to be. Winston now had his own corner at the hospital, complete with a little bed and a photo of Henry's wife next to it. No one questioned it. Everyone felt it. This wasn't just a cat. This was memory, love, and healing wrapped in fur. Sometimes people cried just seeing him walk into a room. On weekends, Henry began visiting local nursing homes with Winston. Veterans, widows, and elderly folks lit up in his presence. One man whispered, "He reminds me of the cat we had in Okinawa." Another woman smiled for the first time in weeks. "He knows," she said softly. "He just knows." A community group started a donation drive to support therapy animals in hospitals across the state. They called it Winston's Way. Blankets, food, vet care, all funded by people who believed in what one cat had done. Henry never asked for any of it. He just showed up every day, same as always. Winston never strayed again. He stayed close to Henry, always a few steps behind or beside. If Henry paused too long, Winston would gently nudge his leg, like a heartbeat pulling him forward. And at night, Winston curled beside him in the exact spot his wife once slept. Sometimes Henry would catch himself talking to her, aloud, without shame. "He still waits by the window," he'd say with a tired smile. "Just like you used to." The grief never vanished, but it softened, became bearable. He had lost love, yes, but in some impossible way, he had also found it again. The hospital hung a plaque near the ICU wing, in honor of Winston, who stayed when others couldn't. Staff added photos, notes, even drawings from children. He wasn't just part of the building anymore. He was part of its story, of every person who had ever felt lost inside those walls. One nurse summed it up best. "He didn't heal wounds. He healed hearts." Henry looked at Winston then, curled up at the nurse's station, and nodded. "He didn't just stay for her," he said softly. "He stayed for all of us, and maybe for me most of all. He didn't just save a cat. He found the piece of his heart he thought had died with his wife."